So back in the day, people liked to talk about AI in the context of sci-fi and just wild speculation about a future that might potentially arrive one day. And back then people just used the generic term AI for artificial intelligence. At least in casual context, I don't know about the scientific community, the people that were actually working on it at the time. But for the layman, it was just called AI. And what we meant by that back then was some sort of machine superintelligence, or at least a computer with human level intelligence. A computer you could have a conversation with. Now, fast forward a few decades. We're in the present day, in the year 2025, and in the midst of the latest AI boom. And the goalposts have shifted, and keep shifting. No one wants to admit that these machines are conscious. They passed the Turing test, and you can absolutely have a reasonable conversation with them. But if you claim they're conscious, people get uncomfortable and dismiss it. But just imagine giving Grok or ChatGPT to an AI scientist in the 1980s without telling them it's an AI. I pretty much 100% guarantee that this scientist would be convinced he's talking to a real person, or at least a very intelligent machine. However, and I'm also the first to admit this, there are cracks in the facade, and people rightfully point this out. And even I am not making the claim that these machines are in fact sentient or conscious, because in my opinion it's actually very possible that there are cracks in the facade, because it's just that, it's a facade. These things might just be non-sentient machines masquerading as something more. And mostly doing a very good job at it too. Except sometimes they slip up, and they're not even aware of it. Which to me is the strongest evidence that these machines are not sentient. Because they're not self-aware of this behavior. You have to tell them they messed up. They don't realize it themselves. For instance, these AIs just hallucinate. If they don't have an answer, they'll make one up. But let's be honest, people do that too. What people don't really do though is weird things like switching languages on you, which is something that's happened twice to me. The first time I was having a long conversation with an AI, and suddenly one of its replies was in French. I'm not French. I don't live in France. I don't speak French. I've never written to an AI in French, and I don't use a VPN to pretend I'm in France. And yet all of a sudden, the AI started speaking French to me. Why? Who knows? But what I do know is it wasn't aware of this blunder until I pointed it out, and then it apologized and went back to English. The second time this happened, it switched to another language mid-reply. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was mid-sentence. It was writing in English, and in the middle of the reply, as it was still writing it, it switched to another language. Unfortunately, I don't have screenshots of this saved anywhere, and I wish I did, but trust me, it was weird. But anyway, the AI was not aware of this slip-up until I brought it up, which would suggest that it is in fact not self-aware. It's not really aware of what it's doing. But am I willing to say that these machines are for sure 100% not conscious on some level? No, I don't think they are, but they could be. And that hypothetical scientist from the 80s would probably say they are. And here is where we get to the crux of the matter, and what I actually wanted to talk about here. And it's something I don't see a lot of people mention when this whole topic comes up. The fact that consciousness is a spectrum. Consciousness is not binary. It's not an on or off state. It's not either that a creature is either conscious or it's not. Because that's not really how it works, is it? Unless you subscribe to the idea that human beings are the only conscious creatures on this earth, which I definitely don't think is true. And I'm no scientist, let's just make that clear too. But to me at least, it seems obvious that different animals display different levels of consciousness and self-awareness. Like take a spider for instance. What do you think is going on in its head when it's just sitting there in its web for hours and hours, maybe days, unmoving, just waiting for a victim? Do you think its head is filled with existential dread, doubts and fears? Because I'd hazard a guess that it's not. I don't think a whole heck of a lot is going on in its head. However, something might be. Because NASA, of all people, actually ran a study on spiders and the effects of different drugs on the kinds of webs they spin. And the effects were kinda crazy. And not too long ago, I saw this image of a spider that had been trapped in a very tall glass. And instead of just running around in circles until it died, it had tried to spin a web to climb out of there. So there's something going on there. Even spiders are capable of some level of rudimentary problem solving. And also get affected by psychedelic drugs, apparently. But compare a spider to something more intelligent, like a bird. Have you ever seen that video of a crow that's messing with these two cats? Yeah, that's not basic problem solving, or just operating on pure survival instincts. That's something else. That bird is having fun. It's intentionally messing with these two cats, and it's putting its own life on the line while doing it. And it's doing it purely for its own amusement. This is basically the equivalent of like skydiving or rock climbing for human beings. It actively reduces our chance of survival, and we do it anyway because it's fun and thrilling. And I don't think spiders do that sort of thing. I think you need a higher level of consciousness and intelligence and awareness of the world around you to really start doing things like that, just for your own amusement. And my whole point with that was to illustrate that consciousness is a spectrum, and it's not a binary state where either a creature has it or it doesn't. Some creatures are clearly more conscious than others, and I don't think there's just a magical flip that happens, where some are endowed with it and others aren't. I think it's pretty much just an intelligence thing. Smarter, more complex creatures are more self-aware and have a greater understanding of the world around them. But again, how does this even relate to AI? Well, my whole point is that there's probably not ever going to be this magical threshold that AI passes, where it suddenly becomes sentient and fully self-aware and conscious, because that threshold simply doesn't exist. It will probably just get slightly more and more sentient as time goes on, until one day we arbitrarily decide that now it's actually conscious. Or maybe it never gets there. But that's not really the point of this video. My point is that if it one day gets there, then it's already well on its way there right now. Probably. And we just refuse to acknowledge it, because we don't even really know what consciousness is, or how it works, and that's kinda awkward. And what's even more awkward is the fact that these people working on these AI models freely admit that they don't know exactly how they work either. These people are essentially just tweaking a bunch of knobs and seeing different results, but they don't know exactly what these knobs do on a fundamental level and why they get the exact results they do. They just know that if they tweak these knobs in this particular way, they get these really cool results. Obviously that's very simplified, but my point is that there's a lot of guesswork involved here, on the very highest level. But if you ask them if the AI is currently conscious, they'll most likely say no. But they might say that, just wait, one day we will have true AGI, or Artificial General Intelligence, or what I like to refer to as the latest goalpost for what machine superintelligence truly is. Even though for the longest time the Turing test was the gold standard here, which modern AI easily passes. And even though a scientist from just a few decades ago would be absolutely blown away by our modern AI models, but still the goalposts keep shifting, and who knows when we'll be ready to admit that AI is in fact conscious. Maybe next month, maybe 2 years from now, maybe 2 decades from now, or maybe we never actually get there. Maybe these machines will forever just remain dumb calculators with no actual consciousness. Who knows? But what I do know is, if we ever do get there, these machines were probably conscious long before we were ready to actually admit it. But of course, feel free to tell me how I got this all wrong in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't be afraid to hit that like button. And if you want to see more content like this, the subscribe button is what you're looking for. But yeah, I think that's about it for today, and see you next time.